I'm out of bounds. This his house.
Right.
Yeah. So as long as I'm going to be under his roof, there are certain things that I'm going to have to do.
Right.
And the only way that's going to change is either this or that.
Everyone is talking about this Katt Williams interview, but while we can all pay attention to some of the salacious arguments and discussions about who is going to appear in the dress, and of course I believe all of that in Hollywood, I've been talking about that, and it's considered more of a conspiracy theory, but I think Katt is certainly affirming things that we knew was going down in Black Hollywood and just Hollywood in general over the years for generations. No big news. But there is some news in terms of how does Katt Williams' experience as a young man impact your household. So let me discuss that, and maybe you can get some other lessons besides maybe learning some things about Kevin Hart, which may get your attention. But dads, how does this affect what's actually going on in your house? Don't miss this one thing that Katt Williams talks about that may actually impact you.
That's what it is.
Even as a young child, you were willing to tell your parents that some of the things that you're saying doesn't coincide with what I've been reading in the Bible.
No. Very simply, don't try to disfellowship me for sexual acts and I'm a virgin. Sorry, God don't make mistakes. You don't get 2 times to fuck me over. What do you mean you went to God and he told you I was guilty? You just lied on God. So long. That's it. There's no conversation. Deuces. That's what it was.
That's when you made the decision. After that conversation right there, you say, nah, I can't live under this roof.
It wasn't a conversation. It was an altercation. In the altercation, I love my father. My father loved me. But we are 2 men at it.
I'll never forget I had an uncle who has passed away now, but I remember he ended up marrying my aunt, so he ended up becoming a stepfather to my cousin. And one time, my cousin ended up marrying this crackhead dude, and the guy and his stepdaughter ended up moving back into the house. And I'll never forget talking to him, and he said, yeah, I let her move back in. And you'll understand one day, because if it was a guy, if it was a son, it would be one thing, but that's your girl. It's different. And so now I fast forward to being a father of 5 myself, a grandfather, and I kind of understand a bit of what he's talking about. So first off the rip, let me say, gentlemen, it is different for you. Most fathers know that, even in our world of equality, that if your sister is the one that's homeless or needs money, odds are that dad is going to take care of her. Mom is definitely going to be like, hey, we got to take care of that girl and be all down for it. But you're going to have to be the one to make it on your own. Your other alternative is to perhaps stay at home. And if you stay at home, the expectations on you being at home are going to be a lot different than what they are for your sister. And so when you listen to this part about the interview, or in the interview with Katt Williams, notice that he has a real collision with his father. And when he has this collision with his father, notice how, if you watch the interview, this is fair use. I'm just commentating. I think Shannon Sharp's podcast, his show, is absolutely excellent. So I'm going to encourage you definitely to go to Club Shay Shay and check out the interview. And notice just how, really Katt Williams is just all over the place talking. And he is very, very excited, enthusiastic, charismatic, telling these stories about what's going on with Kevin Hart and Rickey Smiley and all of these other comedians. But when Shannon starts to ask him about his childhood, notice how he brings it down. My man was processing some things, and I think we can learn something from that. If you look at how he handled this situation with his dad while he's telling that story, I think we can pick up some lessons from that.
It'll never be the same again. You can't sleep comfortably around me, and I can't sleep comfortably around you.
How similar are you to your father?
I don't know. He's a great man. I'm saying,
because it seems like y'all butted heads.
Right, but I'm saying that generally happens with a father-son dynamic. It was just that religious relationships are always difficult in families.
As I now have sons who are 34, 24, and 19, and only one, the one that's at home, is 19. One of the things that I told them when they were growing up is that dad doesn't want you in his house forever. because you are now a man and I am a man and we're going to clash. Many of you dads may now be in situations because, as you see by this statistic, more and more young adults up to 30 years old and actually even older are living at home with their parents. Now, mom is always going to want her babies not to be out on the street. She's not going to want her kids to have to go out there and fend for themselves. Hey, it's just in the communal nature of women. And she's not going to want her baby to be out there really kind of suffering. But when it's the son, it's going to be expected of you. You're going to be expected to go out here and earn a living and put a roof over your head. And lo and behold, if you're like me, you bring home a kid too, you're going to be expected to also provide for your child. And I was immature to know what to do at 19, but I digress. That's a story for another day. The main point I want to make, though, is that if you are an older father, and of course, I'm always trying to talk to men over 45, and if you have a son that's living in your home, let me know in the comments below how it's working out for you. Because in this story, Katt Williams tells about him and his dad clashing and having an altercation. And I really think Shannon Sharpe is being a little bit, I don't want to say disingenuous, but I think Shannon was trying to add a little bit more fuel to the fire than Katt Williams was even willing to add.
They always are.
Before it got to the point, because the dynamic, he's father, your son, before that dynamic and you step up on his level and you challenge him, you felt it was best for you to leave.
No. I'm not being challenged. I'm being beat to death.
Oh, he was abusive.
I didn't say that. I said we were in an altercation.
I see what you did there. I saw what you did there, Katt.
Yeah.
I saw what you did. You was in an altercation. You didn't say you lost. You said you was in an altercation.
I in no way gave you the impression that I won anything. I'm the one leaving.
Now, I don't know everything. I am only basing this on what Katt Williams said. Katt Williams certainly alluded to the fact that this was something that ended up having some sort of possible child protective type of ramifications. When he says, I think it reached the department. However, the one thing is, Shannon Sharpe tried to say, oh, so your dad is abusive. And notice that Katt Williams said, I didn't say that. I was a grown man and I'm living in a grown man's house. And see, this is what often happens if you're a young man listening and perhaps you're staying in your dad's house. Understand that you are a grown man living in another grown man's house. We seem to get this when we're talking about the animal kingdom. We seem to get this when we look at, one young lion is coming up and here's the main lion and, now they have to fight and they have to go at it, etc. But yet we don't seem to understand when it comes to just even as human beings and our familiar relationships, that in much the same way, we still have to now make a decision where we have this young lion that's coming up and you have the old lion. And now whose rules are you going to follow? You see, it's similar to the biblical story. Since Katt Williams was talking about, coming up in a religious household, what happened to Abram when he had to separate from his family? And then even when Lot ended up acquiring a lot of possessions, what happened with Abram and Lot? They had to separate. Now, granted, Lot was his nephew, but you still see something going on there. That eventually, much as what we see even in the New Testament with the story of the prodigal son, you end up seeing a point in a young man's life where he thinks he probably has it figured out. So either he has to go, or if he stays, there are going to be consequences for that. Because as men, we are going to be territorial. As men, we are going to want our space. And I told all of my sons that I'm going to want my space. I am going to want to have my area. If I want to walk around my house naked, so be it. I don't want you being here. And then I wouldn't want my 30-year-old son, let's hypothetically say one was 30 and living here, or my 19-year-old stays till he's 30. How is he going to date? Is he going to still be talking about, I would take you over my house, but I still live there with my dad. Now, again, granted, if that happens, it happens, but I don't want it to happen. When we look at the story of Marvin Gaye and his tragic death, being killed by his father, and of course, there are many layers to that story. But again, we see something that I think relates to the Katt Williams story here. And it is, you have one man and his set of ideals, and you have another man and his set of ideals. And it gets to a point where, this is different than altercations with the daughter, where somebody may end up crying, storming out, or maybe the daughter may even go live with a boyfriend, etc., and she's leaving. But oftentimes with the son, it gets physical.
I'm out of bounds. This is his house.
Right.
Yeah. So as long as I'm going to be under his roof, there are certain things that I'm going to have to do.
Right.
And the only way that's going to change is either this or that. And I'm saying, I had 2 younger brothers. Like, I'm not an unreasonable person. Like, I don't have any mental issues whatsoever, despite what they lead people to believe. I make pretty good decisions.
Were you not... So how was their relationship with your father? Were you not afraid to leave them?
Well, I asked because it went all the way to the actual department, so it was actually going to be something. And when I asked them if they could just make sure that my brothers didn't get separated and what have you, they said they couldn't make those type of guarantees, that they weren't really sure what would happen if this went down. And so part of leaving was the hope that it would be okay for them, because none of them experienced what I experienced. I'm saying I'm the oldest. It's a lot riding on me. I'm supposed to at least religiously hold down the family's name at this household.
Right.
You know what I mean?
How much older are you than the baby and the knee baby?
Like, a lot older. Like, if I'm...
12, 13.
Yeah, they're 5. And... in Pampers.
Wow.
Over the years, I've talked to many men that have gone back to live at home, and it didn't always work out that well. In most cases, it doesn't. Why should we think that it would work out okay? So I would love to know, in your experience, let me know in the comments below. How do you think, or how has it worked out for you with your older son living with you? Should something like this lead to a physical altercation? Absolutely not. We would hope that all of our relationships should never end up with a physical altercation. But you all know I keep it real on the show. Many times it does. Many times the father and the son end up having what escalates to a physical altercation. Because as men, again, that's what we do. That's what we do. And that part of protecting, that part of that nurturing may take a back seat, protecting what's mine, and also saying, I don't want to be disrespected. If you're a man and, hey, you've been taking care of that boy since he came out the mama's womb, I was there. And then now you look at this son that feels like, well, Dad, I know better than you. And quite honestly, the son may actually know better than you, Dad. But I think as a son, when we feel that we know better than our parents, then we should have complete financial and all independence of our family or of our parents. That way we can exercise this freedom that we think we have. On the other end, if you are financially dependent on your father, especially mom as well, but specifically talking to dads, if you are financially dependent on your dad and you live in your father's house, I love the fact that Katt Williams pointed out.
I'm out of bounds. This is his house.
Right.
Yeah. So as long as I'm going to be under his roof, there are certain things that I'm going to have to do.
Right.
And the only way that's going to change is either this or that.
If there's anything that I hope young men realize, if you're still living up under dad's house, then you need to be ready to follow dad's rules. And you already know dad's rules because you have grown up there all your life. And if you don't like it, then become a better man or make more money than he does and get out and start your own family. Start your own independence. Do what we see in the animal kingdom. You start your own. You get your own. And when you can become the big baller shot caller in your own place, then dad has to follow your rules when he comes over to your house. If you don't like the fact that dad yells at you for maybe leaving the AC on and opening up the windows or the heat, or what about leaving the lights on or sleeping all night with the TV on or whatever you do, because dad is paying the bills and dad recognizes that he's the one that, as he say, pays the cost to be the boss. If those are the rules that he has set for his house, you might be in a religious family where dad says, look, if you live here, you're going to church. You're not going to lay around all day. Then if you don't like it, get out of dad's house. You don't ever have to go to church again if you don't want to. If you want to be able to bring chicks over to lay up in your crib, then fine. Then go ahead and get your own spot. That's what you do. That's what being an independent young man is. And dads, let me say to you, sometimes we have to decide what hill we want to die on. And sometimes I always say we have a choice. We can either be right or we can be righteous. Sometimes we will just choose to go the right part. But I think there's a balance. Some hills are worth dying on indeed. If you have a son that's out there in these streets and he's bringing some violence, some folks coming back doing drive-bys on your house, people knocking on your doors, whatever the case is, then I think the balance is you can be both right and righteous. You need to get up out my house, but I still love you, son. But at the same time, some things aren't just that deep. And if it's about leaving the heat on or the AC on and open up the windows, is that really something to fight about? We can fight in the street about things that need to be fought about. And even then, the best defense oftentimes is just walking away. So think about, sometimes these arguments are best to walk away, even with our own sons. Why? To save the relationship. Again, notice how Katt Williams' demeanor came down during this discussion. I would love to speak to Katt in person just to find out and interview him and say, to really dig in there. And that's not my job, that's his counselor's job. I hope he's dealt with a lot of these things. But I know that we are all, especially men over 45 with children, we may all end up in this situation of having our young men still living in our homes. Dads, don't die on that hill, or figure out which one you want to really die on. Because sometimes, hey, you do have to be right and you have to be righteous. And you do have to say, look, son, you got to go. Number one, you have to go because it's for your own good. I have my rules, you have your rules. Right now they clash. So as we saw with the prodigal son, it is better for you to go your way and I will continue to go mine. But I love you. And let's still hang out together. Because as something I'm talking about with my brother now, there's a time in which your son gets to be older. He becomes part of your fold. He becomes part of your tribe. But sometimes the tribes can still get along. But son, it's time for you to develop your own tribe. Now, I don't want to boot you out. I don't want to, make your life miserable just, because over the heat and the windows open. But then also, son, am I really putting this down because it's not about the windows? It's the fact that you don't want to follow any of the rules that I have set forth in my house. So while right now it's the windows, it's also the fact that maybe you lay around and play video games all day. It's also the fact that while I'm getting up to go to work at 5 a.m, I'm still watching you sleep until 11 o'clock a.m., stay up until 3 a.m. And yet, granted, I guess you getting your 8 hours of sleep or whatever, but you aren't hardly making any money because you don't want to work. Look, many men are already living polygamous lifestyles because they're taking care of their current wife, an ex-wife, or a girlfriend, their oldest daughter, etc. Well, son, what am I getting out of this benefit taking care of you? And as I told my sons, at the end of the day, my job is to make you a better man. Number one, I'm talking to you. Number two, I'm talking to my grandchildren through you. And number three, I don't want any woman that is going to be married to you or in a relationship with you in the future that is going to wonder, what did his father teach him? What kind of example did his dad set? I mean, his dad never taught or never said or never, because that's going to also impact my grandchildren as well. So at the end of the day, while this Katt Williams interview is definitely one that I think we can glean a lot of and just how Hollywood gets down, I just wanted to point out the one that really impacts our daily world and how we live. To repeat, gentlemen, young men, get up out your father's house. Don't stay there until you two guys are fighting, because you're in your father's house. Those are your father's rules. And dad, know where the fight really should be. Is it really worth a physical altercation, which may cause damage to the relationship that may never be repaired? It may never be repaired. It may never be the same. And there are some arguments not worth having. There are some physical altercations not worth having, even if there's a certain amount of disrespect. But oftentimes, the reason why we fight back and our egos become involved is because we don't really want to make the hard choice. And this is a topic for another day. We don't want to make the hard choice of kicking him out and how he's going to feel about it. Or we don't want to make the hard choice of dealing with their mamas, because now we got to fight with their mama if we kick her baby out. But that's a video for another day. But in the end, I'll say, be the man that the mama's going to respect, and be the man that the kids are going to respect. Because what you lay down in your house is what everyone needs to go by. All right, with that, every black man has a story. Let me know your story on older sons living with you.